Thank you so much, Corinne. Thank you all very much. And please give a very warm welcome to Eddie Rama. Now, it's wonderful to be here back at Convoco. I'm very honored to speak at Convoco 2019. And as always, Corinne and I discussed over the year who could be the artist we involve in the Convoco session. Last year we discussed, as many of you who were here remember, with Adam Curtis, who very much addressed the role of politics and art in society. And it's interesting actually in relation to Europe, because we discussed a lot about John Latham, the radical ideas of John Latham and Barbara Stevini, who founded the Art Displacement Group. And they had this idea that every organization, government, but also corporation, company, should always have an artist in residence or an artist on the board. And that we still believe is a very, very good idea. And it's actually interesting, the other day I found an old conversation I had with Umberto Eco, the late Umberto Eco, the visionary Italian writer, and he talked about that very idea in relation to Europe, because he actually said he remembered about 10 years ago to have been invited to the EU and to actually, with Rem Koolhaas and others, really think about what art, architecture, poetry could do very much at the core of the EU. And the late Umberto Eco said we should never forget this idea. So maybe that is actually something for Ursula von der Leyen once she starts, the presidency of the European Union to actually address, to put artists somehow at the center. Now this year we felt it would be very fascinating and urgent to actually have an artist with us who at the same time is also a politician. Eddie Rama's art and his politics basically go together. He is the Primeminister of Albania since 2013, the former mayor of Tirana from 2000 to 2011, and has produced an artistic language to generate a platform for discussion and exchange. The artist as political activist intervening in societal structures calls to mind, of course, Joseph Beuys's idea, well known here, of the artist as a social sculptor. It's interesting that Rama, who actually trained as a painter, has from the very beginning been interested in this idea of art in society. Eddie has also been very outspoken about the importance of Europe. A quote here from The Guardian: finally having the possibility to place ourselves, and that refers to Albania, in a safe zone from the curse of history. That's why the importance of Albania and Europe for Eddie. And that, of course, connects to something Habermas said when he called the European project to realize its democratic potential by evolving into a cosmopolitan community. What he means is a cross-border awareness of a shared destiny, or we could also call it in German a grenzüberschreitende Willensbildung, to quote Habermas. Now, I wanted to begin with the beginning, Eddie, and actually ask you about your very beginnings, because we met through our friend Andri Sala, the artist, and Andri told me this amazing story that when he was a teenager, and he's now a very well-known artist and filmmaker, but when he was a teenager, actually early teen, and grew up childhood in Tirana, that you once came to his parents' home and convinced them that they should let him be an artist. So you were his mentor, and he told me that, for you it all started with painting. So I wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about that and about your beginnings as an artist.
Thank you for having me here, and I hope that after the all heavy stuff you had all the day, maybe we can provide a lighter end. I'm the Prime Minister of Albania, and now since around 20 years I'm in politics, but art has been my reason of being since I was a kid, and I continue to do it, and I do it in my office now. It's serious, it's not something to laugh. And of course, being an Albanian born in the communist Albania and having to deal with art was not a simple exercise, because at that time Albania was the North Korea of Europe. We were separated totally not only from the degenerated West, but also from the treacherous East. And our art space was very much limited to socialist realism. And we had to grow up in a country where art and culture of 20th century was literally banned, where Romeo and Julia, for example, which is not 20th century, frankly, was banned, where Gustav Mahler was banned, where Proust, of course, was banned, and where history of art at the end of 80s in the Academy of Arts ended being visual with Gustave Courbet. And after Gustave Courbet, we had 4 lectures with no slides, a depressed professor in front of us telling us how terrible things turned. In the beginning, because of some spoiled petit bourgeois kids named Impressionists, and then because a psychopath named Vincent van Gogh, and then because of an anti-social behaviorist named Paul Gauguin, and then because of devil in person named Pablo Picasso. But this was all not visual. And to get access to the images was really very, very difficult and also dangerous. A country where, many things that today no one would not believe, won't believe, happened. And so, this was, I hope, the answer of the question.
Thank you. And it's actually in 1999 that I met the then very young Henri Sala for the first time. He still studied at Le Fresnoy in France, and told me these 2 amazing stories. First of all, that you had convinced his parents to let him be an artist, because they were skeptical. But secondly, he also told me the story that the year earlier, in 1998, your father had died from a heart attack, and that you came back as an artist for the funeral, and that you never left Tirana again, and soon after were cultural minister. Could you tell us a little bit about this entry into politics and how that happened?
It's another episode that shows that it's not easy to understand the place we live in, because I went back to Tirana to bury my father, and after the funeral I became Minister of Culture. So it's something that would need more time to explain, but it came because during the change of the regime, everything started in the Academy of Arts, and unlike on the other former communist countries, the Albanian anti-regime movement started from the history of art, started from taking the step, at that time very brave step, to show in public images that were forbidden, and to open up to the chapters that were not allowed to be seen, the chapters of the history of art. And so it was from the Romanian Revolution. Romania was the last to fall from the former Soviet Empire bloc. We were, as I said, disconnected from that bloc since 1960, because we wanted to be loyal to Stalin, just to understand why. And so it took 1 year, from 89 to 90. And during that year, in the Academy of Arts, things moved and created an environment from which then everything blew. And the day of blowing was the 10th anniversary of the death of John Lennon, which was a reason to have the first party, music party, in a public space where people could share forbidden music together. And forbidden music, some alcohol, the accumulation of 1 year and more, and the power to the people song made the cocktail that then unleashed the movement. And afterwards, I continued to live in a kind of schizophrenia between art and politics, not as a politician, but as a citizen that was interested to say. So somehow I became a professional troublemaker. And at that moment, 98, I was given the Minister of Culture job without never thinking of becoming minister. And Ministry of Culture was the first public state building I entered as minister. I never entered before in any state building. So, is the correct answer?
Yeah, thank you very much. Then, of course, and we want to talk more about politics, but I wanted to talk maybe one last question about this early period with art, because then you became mayor of Tirana, and that led to an extraordinary project where you decided to basically bring hope to the city through colors. Can you tell us a little bit about this idea? But also, very early on, you decided actually to make ecology center stage with the Clean and Green project to create parks, etc. It would be interesting to hear a little bit about these projects, where again, you put art into society.
So as I said previously, Albania was the North Korea of Europe, and very heavily collectivistic society where no private property of any sort was allowed, where even God was banned. So it's the only country among the whole communist countries of Europe where, under the spell of the Chinese Cultural Revolution, because once the regime disconnected with Soviet Union and its satellites, our new love story was China. So it was, and we had songs like Albania and China were the two lions preserving the species, and so on. And so the matter of fact was that when the regime collapsed, people reacted in a very, let's say, eager and also somehow wild search of their own identity. Because under the Chinese Cultural Revolution spell, we were obliged to have the same type of haircut, the same type of dressing, and there was even a measure of how large the pants should be to not look like the Beatles and to not look like too tight. It was 24 centimeters. And I'm not kidding, you know. I remember times when we would go to the beach and we would go down from the train and there was a kind of tunnel in the midst of two lanes of people with scissors who would look to the pants, and if the pants would be too large, and then the consequences were terrible. So people came back with a very big eagerness to recuperate their own identity, individual identity, through first and foremost private property. And this was not easy. This was really very disruptive because people started to move, and it was a double-sided movement. People from the centers leaving and going to Italy and to Europe, people from the peripheric areas coming towards the centers. So every park, every every meter square of public space was occupied. So it started by putting tables and selling things, and then kiosks, and then buildings, and then so we lost the public space, and totally. And so when I became mayor, it was kind of, city with no public space. Everything was occupied, and at the same time, it was a big kind of run to get the world within the house. So to bring the fridge, to bring the television, to bring the washing machine, and so on. By the way, TV sets at that time were given by authorization, and there were boards in the institutions that would decide to whom authorized to have a TV set. So Tirana and Albania became like, in every street, you could see the emballage of things thrown, and at the same time, people from within the buildings trying to get more space. So balconies were transformed in additional space of the kitchen. First floors, windows were broken to become doors, and the bedroom became flower shop. The other room became a bar. The neighbor apartment became, I don't know, shoes shop. People on the top, they broke the ceilings and to add more space, because at that time we lived in a very, let's say, tight spaces, and also you were married, you had to be there until you got a new apartment, and so on and so forth. And instead of building social housing, the regime built 600,000 bunkers to protect Albania from the hypothetical attack of the American imperialists. And the cost of a bunker was the cost of an apartment of 75 meter squares. So imagine what would have been if they would have built apartments instead of bunkers. So this was the situation, and I became mayor in that situation. And nobody cared anymore about the outside. Nobody cared anymore how the building would look. So the buildings became like kind of popular deconstructivism. So it was not one architect, but everyone was pushing from behind the walls, and the building was being deconstructed. But it was terrible, gray, disruptive, And so what to do? What to do with a budget that was nothing point something, and with the people that had a big expectation. And so I started by painting the buildings. So it came out of necessity. Many times this has been wrongly, I think, described as aesthetic operation. It was political operation with colors. And so we took a road and we started to paint it, to paint the buildings. And it was incredible, because it was a EU grant to improve this entrance road of Tirana. And I decided the colors in a not very democratic way, to say. And it's a discussion to also be done, Can it be democratic? I don't think so, because if it's democratic, it's gray. Because someone would like the orange, someone would like the blue, and then they'll decide, okay, to live in peace, make it gray. And the compromise between colors, by the way, is gray. If you bring together the three fundamental colors, primary colors, the combination is black. And you put then some white and become gray, so there is no chance to have. And so I remember this, and I'll stop here. While the first building was being painted, my assistant told me, The guy who is the owner of the company is phoning and want to talk to you. So I take the telephone, it says, Mr. Mayor, something terrible is happening. I said, what's happening? So we started to paint with this color you gave us. And there's a traffic jam, and there are 200 people in front of the building. And I have this French supervisor who is I don't know what he is talking, but he is visibly angry because his skin is dark red. And he's screaming to me. I said, okay, I'm coming. And it was my first thing. I didn't have yet the first press conference after the victory. And I go there, and I have this French guy. He was literally, you know, hysterical. And it was a very hysterical orange being painted, something like 20 meters square of orange in this surface, and 200 people looking, some laughing, some screaming, some being shocked. And this guy says to me, I said, what's the problem? He says, what's the problem? What do you mean, what's the problem? Look at this. This is terrible. I said, what is terrible? He said, sir, these are European taxpayers' money. How can they be used to put orange to buildings? I said, why? He said, what do you mean why? This is out of any European standard. I said, but tell me what is within the European standard all over the place here. He said, I don't care. All over the place is your problem. This is European money. I said, good. Then I have to make my press conference to say, forget about communist censorship. Apparently, the European Union is worse. They want us to decide what color to put in the buildings. He said, no, we have to find a compromise. I said, sir, compromise is gray, and we have enough gray, so let us go on. So we went on, and colors became the biggest discussion in the poorest country in Europe. You had colors in radio, you had colors in TV, you had colors in parliament. It seemed like Albania was transformed in a cafe in Montmartre, and Claude Monet, Edouard Manet, and all these guys fighting. And then, in a certain moment, of course, was a noisy minority against it. And I said, maybe I just fucked up, you know? Maybe I have to just stop and made a survey, which remains my preferred survey in 20 years of politics. Do you like what's happening in your city with the colors? And do you want it to stop or continue? Do you like it? Was 67% yes. Do you want it to continue? Was 85%. So half of them that didn't like it didn't want it to stop. So this was like, you know, you know, there are times in life you have to say I don't like it, but you don't want it to stop, you know. Right?
Now, of course, that has a lot to do with, you know, Umberto Eco's remarks, and it also brings us to the beginning of you being Prime Minister, because very early on you expressed, you know, a desire for actually Albania becoming part of the EU. You said it was, as I quoted initially, about having the possibility to place ourselves in a safe zone from the curse of history. And so, given the theme of this year's Convoco, we are right already in the middle of the theme, but it would be great to hear a little bit more about this intention and how it evolved over time.
About Europe, you mean?
Yeah, Albania and Europe.
We go to the gray now. So Europe for us is what has been, I think, for them who imagined it. And that's why sometimes I think our contemporary friends in Europe look at us like we are, you know, naive, or we are too much excited about something that give no excitement. But in fact, I think it should be a reason why, for the first time in its history, Europe is passing a generation from a generation to generation with no war. And for us, Europe is exactly the removal of our own self in a place where we are safe from war. And we have seen war. It's not that, for us, war is not some black and white archive films in Netflix about Hitler. We had war in the Balkans. I was Minister of Culture when we received 500,000 refugees in Tirana, in Albania, from Kosovo, being pushed out because of an ethnic cleansing. 500,000, 500,000 people. And we saw what happened in all the countries and so on. So for us, war is real. And for us, in the region, Europe is first and foremost what was meant to be a project of peace and of cooperation for the good of the young generations. So we can't give up on that. Of course, you know, when you see Britain leaving and Albania wanting to enter, something doesn't really match. But how to say it, you know? It's easier to divorce than to prevent a marriage. And so we are in love. We are in love, and you know, when you are in love, whatever your parents and your friends and whoever will say, you know, it's not the right love. You want to be married, you get married. That's it. And although Europe is not going well, to say the least, we still want it. And it's not that we want to join Europe and add more headaches to the big guys there who are apparently fed up with some countries that are the newcomers and so on and so further. But it's because we want to build a European country and European region with institutions and with rule of law and functioning democracies. And there is only one way to do it. It's Europe. I strongly believe, you know, we are a country of Muslims and Christians. We have different kind of Muslims and different kinds of Christians, Catholics, Orthodox. I am Catholic, my wife is Muslim. Our 2 kids from the first marriages are Orthodox. Now we have a new one together. I don't know what he'll choose to be. Maybe he'll decide to be Jewish and would be fine. So the thing is, we leave what brings us all together is Europe. And what makes our life easier somehow yet is Europe. So, and what, humbly I can say it, what makes Europe's life more difficult is that there is no story. So there was a fascist story, there was a communist story, there was a liberal story. Now, you know, it's a collection of different stories, but it's not a common story, you know? It's like, and I don't know, can I continue or should I continue? Or
we want to hear more, yeah, because
no,
we want to hear also about Europe, you know, because of course there are EU values, there are Albanian values, you know, we discussed earlier over lunch how that negotiation happened, so it would be interesting to hear about that, and just also what is your personal vision for Europe?
Now, EU values or Albanian values, difficult, but let me say one thing. Albania was the only country in Europe that had more Jews after the war than before the war. It's the only country in Europe where no Jew was released to the Germans, to the Nazis, sorry. And where the Nazis lost it was that Muslim families adopted Jews. And the Albanian Catholic cardinal made a lot of fake baptized procedures to give Jews Catholic identity. And when the Nazis convoked the 4 religious leaders they were the only, let's say, authority in the country after the occupation. And they said, we want to sign an agreement with you. You have to agree that the gold that was transferred to Rome should be taken by us, by the Nazis, and you have to agree that the list of Jews should be given. They signed the gold, not the Jews. Take the gold, forget about the Jews. So, is it a value? I think it's a big value, and I think, the fact that in our little poor country, opening the doors and sheltering people is not something you would put in question, but you just do. I think it's a European value, no? And to go beyond Albania to the region, because we have a, kind of some strange past, and our first constitution, our canon, in the first clause writes, the house of the Albanian belongs to God and to the guest. And so hospitality is a religion in Albania. It was, and it still is. We have a country that had passed through many hardships during the democratic transition. We had pyramid schemes falling, 4,000 people dead in 97 near civil war. And we never had a foreigner touched, never. So I remember at that time, we are in Austria, so maybe it works here, this story. A British journalist came in the middle of the blow up. Everyone was armed because people lost all their savings in these pyramid schemes. And of course, it was dangerous. And he wrote an article and said, if you're a foreigner, visit Albania because it's dangerous for them, but not for us. And don't listen to people that say, oh, you can get killed, you can get raped, you can get robbed. Ah, yes, he says. Be careful. If you go in Rognar Hotel, the Austrian hotel of the city, they can steal you from the telephone bill. This is the only stealing you can have in Albania if you're a foreigner at that time. So Austrians can steal you and Albanians not. So to say it very, very bluntly, but it was not me, it was the Brit that said it. And Brits can say many things in nowadays, So.
Now, I have a few last questions. I know that we are out of time. I mean, one thing is about the Multispeed Europe, the car Europe idea. There are so many discussions around that. What's your view?
You interrupted me because I wanted to finish by saying that
should finish.
During the refugee crisis, Albania was not touched because the route went from Greece to Macedonia, today North Macedonia, and then Serbia, and up to Hungary, and then Hungary built a wall, and then they had to go in another direction through Croatia and Slovenia. And so, we are in the region, in the Western Balkans, we are surrounded by EU borders. So I'm sure that 99% of parliamentarians in the EU parliaments, they don't know. When they hear about Western Balkans and Albania and other people wanting to join, they may think, oh, these guys should be somewhere when Turkey ends or somewhere beyond Ukraine, so it's enough. No, we are within. So it's like simply having, the kidney dragging out of your body. It's inside, surrounded by, and so the refugees would enter EU through Greece, would get out EU in North Macedonia and through Serbia, and that will re-enter EU in Croatia or in Hungary. So what's the point of keeping this space within and without, and leaving this space like a zone where people are still very much believing in the idea of being part of this big family. But, you know, if this idea will fade, what is the difference between a young Muslim in our region and a young Muslim in, let's say, Iraq? The difference is that our young Muslim has Europe, has the dream, has the perspective, has a way of living and of contributing to the world that is, you know, paved by values and by tradition. The young Muslim in Iraq, where is the perspective? So it's very important to understand that, yes, we are Europeans, but being part of the Union for us is not a matter of adding to the mess, but it's simply a matter of belonging once and forever to a space of values and people that is the best in the world.
Now, two last questions. We've all seen images over the last couple of weeks in relation to the June 30 election, images which are quite disruptive of what we think of the new Albania. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, maybe I can. No, I don't know. I'm biased because I'm one side. There is another side that if you had invited them here, you would have heard a completely different story. But it's the beauty at the end of living in freedom and democracy, because you have totally different stories sometimes. But one thing that communism did, among many other things, which is not meant to be a crime, but which has defined our life after communism faded away, is eliminating for everyone, since a kid, the idea of the other. There was no other. There were only enemies. So it was us and the enemies. So the idea of the opponent never was part of our mindset. We had our own selves and the enemies. So you can, overthrow a regime in 3 days when the time has come. But I don't know if it's enough, one generation or two, to change the mindset. So communism somehow is like Chernobyl. You have the blow, you have the people that are killed in the place, you have the people that are wounded, you have the whole catastrophe, but then you have the radiation. And then you see the malformations or the deformations that come out of, babies, species. And so detoxing our mindset from what we were told and used to do is not easy. Now, what is this? Why I'm saying this in trying to answer your question? Because we have a very tough political life, in terms of very tough. I strongly believe that the quality of democracy, the quality of living together does not depend on how much you agree, but in which way you disagree. If you disagree in a nice way, like Austrians, or if you disagree in a hard way, like, for example, Brits nowadays. So this makes the quality of life. And our quality of life in politics is, frankly, very low, because, we can't even agree about the time. I see now is 1843. But if my opponents would see it, would say, no, it's 1844, and by the way, it's 1844 now. So we need to grow up. Democracy is not an easy exercise, and growing up and maturing is part of this painful period of transition. And Europe is very important, and European integration is unique because of this. It gives you the tools to modernize. It gives you the way and the know-how to build institutions, to build a credible justice system. And combining the know-how of Europe with the very attractive power Europe has on the Albanians, you You can make reforms that are really very unpopular, but that have big support. Because people say, yes, okay, this is not nice, but we have to do it because we are Europeans and we want to belong to Europe. So these Europes of many speeds and many, it's part of the, I think it's part of the discussion within the European Union that need to reform, by no means, because this organization with 28, 27 now, or maybe never, maybe there will be 28 again, I don't know, but it doesn't work. It's a lot of vested interests. It's a lot of crossing vetoes. It's a lot of bureaucracy and so on. So need to be reformed. I can understand very well the French president when he says it doesn't work with 27, let alone to work with 6 more, and coming from the craziest part of Europe, by the way, the Western Balkans. But in the same time, I don't get it when people in Europe, states or leaders, do not understand that for us the integration process, the journey, is much more important than even the arrival, because through the journey we can modernize, we can create the states we never had in our history, and we can, possess the know-how that Europe has.
Now, the journey in politics. There is a journey, your journey in politics, and as we initially said, there is your journey in art. And of course, your journey in art never stops. You do many exhibitions. You participated in the Venice Biennale. 2 years ago, you had a recent exhibition in Berlin. And it's, of course, your drawings, which always continue. You continue to do these doodles in meetings, and you do them in your office as well. You do them when you travel. They sometimes become wallpaper. And more recently, you went actually from these 2D drawings into 3D drawings. You actually started to make a lot of ceramics. So there is no end to experimentation in your visual art, and I think it would be great, because we started with art, to talk a little bit about these more recent works.
So when I became Minister of Culture, after the burial of my father, I thought I buried my artist in myself, because, But it all started, it all started out of boredom, out of impossibility to stand government meetings. I was member of the government, and for me it was a totally new life. Never ever before I had to deal with paperwork. So staying with all these guys and having hours of discussion on decrees and decisions, and from police to environment, I was all the time drawing on the papers. And after every session, we had weekly session, the Minister of Education was on my right side, would say, "Can I take it?" I said, "Take it, And one day I go to the guy and to his office, and we had something to discuss. At the end he says, "I want to show you my art collection." I said, "You have an art collection?" I said, "Yes." And he had put all my art in this kind of nice way, file. And I said, "Oh my God, this is art." And the guy seemed to me a thief. He said, "He's stolen my art." But I couldn't say anything, so I went in my office terrified, and I said to my assistant, "This guy, it's a thief. He stole my art." And she started to smile. She said, "Don't worry, you have hundreds of them." And so she opened her cupboard. And apparently I was doing it all the time in my office. And she was collecting and collecting and collecting. So when I became mayor, until mayorship, they were black and white, so with pens. When I became mayor, I brought the colors in my table to paint the buildings, to give the indication of the buildings, and then the drawings started to become like that. And it's all the time. It's during the meetings, during the phone calls, it's during my moments of solitude. It's not only when I meet foreigners. I don't do it, because they would not understand. I do it, by the way, but I do it in black and white while taking notes. once I had a friend came to me for some reason. He was freaking out, and I was drawing. In a certain moment, he said, listen, I know that with power comes arrogance, but it's better to tell me to get out than to be so arrogant and selfish to do your drawing while I am telling you that I have a big problem. I said, sorry. It was not meant, but sorry. And then, after a while, he was talking. He says to me, are you following? I said, no, I'm not following. Let me draw. If I draw, I follow. Otherwise, I'm not here. So he said, okay, please draw. So it's a lot of concentration in the topic while you draw. So my suggestion is draw during meetings because you'll get much more information from the meeting. And you are far less stressful when you react. So when I am drawing and I have to react to sometimes to my collaborators, not being the best Democrat in the room, I am much more, soft than when I have no pen, when I have nothing, and I'm just the guy not getting it.
So it's important. It's important, of course, also because it goes back to Umberto Eco in the same conversation I had with him, where he talked about the importance of having artists in the EU, of having artists in politics, of having artists on the board of organizations. He was also telling me that we need to do something about the disappearance of doodling and handwriting, because he says, in the digital age, less and less people do that. So it's also a protest. I've devoted my entire Instagram to that every day, to keep doodling alive. But now you went into 3D, you're also doing amazing ceramics, but besides that, you also put art in the center of openness and dialogue in Tirana. It's a whole organization. You commissioned artists like Carsten Höller, Thomas Deman, Flaka Haliti, who is an Albanian artist who actually lives in Germany, Filip Areno, to do projects, and these are just a few. So it would be interesting to hear a little bit about the Center for Openness, and I'm particularly interested to wrap the conversation up here, to hear a little bit about the mushroom, about Carsten Höller's mushroom.
Yeah.
I think it's a great story.
So the 3D, what you, Hans Ulrich, mean about 3D is sculpting. So I never sculpted before. It was a friend of mine, a sculptor, who took my drawings and made some plates and some cups of tea for my mother with my drawings, without asking my permission, but he did it. So I went to my mother, I saw, and I did not like it, but I liked the gesture. So I said, I will go to him and say, thank you for doing it, but don't do it anymore. So I went, and his ceramic studio was full of these vases with fresh clay, and I started to touch the clay, and I got it. So, and I started to go every Sunday. It became my gym. So instead of running, I used to go to deal with the clay, and it was fantastic. It's fantastic because it's the only moments the only hours in my life that I don't have the mobile phone with me. So it's the perfect digital detox. And so this added to the drawings, and they are going to exhibitions and so on. The center is something else. When I became Prime Minister, before becoming Prime Minister, I always said, if one day I become Prime Minister, this building will not have fences anymore, because it was surrounded, looked like a prison, with fences, with soldiers. And I always believed that buildings protect themselves through beauty, not through fences. And the beautiful building is intimidating more than an ugly building with fences. So I took off the fences, and the whole first floor was opened up to the public and is now a center for openness and dialogue, we call it. We have exhibitions, we have public library, we have a little movie theater where kids can come and can project their movies and can discuss. And we have also discussions there. And I said protesters can come and use it for free to set the case. And if they want, I can come, ministers can go to discuss with them. But you know, protesters have a problem with discussing, because if they discuss, they are not protesters anymore. So it's not easy, but still it's there also for this. And so we had some very generous contributions from Thomas Demand, who practically was the artist that opened the center. We had a beautiful show of his work. We had Philip Pareno donation, one beautiful marquise in the entrance of the Primeminister building, which was very controversial. It still is. My opponent friends, they want to break it but until now it has survived. But the mushroom of Karsten that was put in the garden didn't survive the assault of the protesters, so they broke it. They broke it, and of course it was a sad moment. It was sad, but it was also difficult to explain to Karsten that it was not an aesthetical protest. It was a political protest. It was against me, not against the mushroom. They couldn't get me, they got the mushroom, and so the mushroom was broken. And I was very happy when Karsten called me after a month and said, I have a great idea. Because I said to him, we need to do it again. I said, we'll do it again, but we'll do it 25% higher. So whoever will touch it will know that it will come back higher. So this will prevent people from harming the mushroom, but if they harm it, the mushroom just grows. So I find it beautiful, you know, it's like, you know, surviving by growing and, you know, and reacting by coming back. So it's a very beautiful idea, and I'm looking forward to have this bigger mushroom now, which may inspire and incite some more protests, but then we'll have it even bigger, so life goes on.
Now, one very last question. It is the only recurrent question in all our interviews. But before that, before asking the last question, I wanted you all to give a very big applause to Corinne Flick. To thank Corinne for bringing us all here together for this amazing junction making, as J.G. Ballard said. And my last question, Eddie, the only question I always ask in conversation, is about unrealized projects. I've asked you that before because it's interesting. We know a lot about architects' unrealized projects because they publish them quite regularly, and it's actually very productive. By publishing them, they often get it built. But we know almost nothing about artists, poets, writers, as a matter of fact, also politicians' unrealized projects. And there are many categories of the unbuilt. You know, there are projects which are too big to be realized, utopias, dreams. We once worked on an exhibition called Utopia Station. There are projects also which are too small to be realized. Silvio Meirelles, my artist friend in Brazil, once wanted to realize a tiny little cube in a huge museum. And it took him 30 years to find a museum which would agree to empty and just exhibit the little cube. So that project was too small to be realized. Then, of course, there are projects which are censored. And then, as Doris Lessing once told me, there are projects which are self-censored. I think we all have projects which we have not yet dared to do. So in this whole kind of, you know, complex of the unrealized, I wanted to ask you to tell us about one unrealized project you would like or dream to do.
No, one unrealized project was to go from the painted buildings for political reasons to just cheer up the community. And by the way, we got fantastic results that show how much beauty is important and what the power of beauty is against criminality, against social disruption, against marginalization, against weakness in the relation between the citizens and the institutions, because in the painted roads, we got 100% tax collection, municipal tax collection, which when I started as a mayor were 4%. So people would not pay municipal tax. They would not even, they would not even consider that municipality existed because the city was in a disaster. And we had a very important lowering of criminality in general. So, and one day I was crossing one of these roads while still we were doing some final works, and I see a family moving the fences from the shop and putting just, beautiful glass vitrine. And I said, "You are taking off the fences?" And the man said, "Yes, because now it's safe." I said, "Why? The government has brought more police?" "What police?" he said. "It's beautiful. Look, there are lights, there are colors, the pavement is nice, there are trees, so nobody will touch it anymore." So it was instinctive, a feeling of safety. So then, what was the question?
Your unrealized project, your dream.
And then, then I started to invite artists to paint buildings. So this was the second level, because it became it became practically the first good news from Albania, these buildings, these paintings. So it was good, it was nice, tourists. So I invited artists, and a lot of artists came to paint buildings. Olafur Eliasson made, and all for free. What I asked from them was I sent the pictures, they made the scheme, and then we realized. So then the third phase, which was not realized, I wanted to connect with a big company of paint, and I didn't find anyone to be so forward-looking and to say, "Listen, give us the amount of paint, and then to transform the city in open-air art, urban art museum by giving to different artists different pieces or neighborhoods, and you walk in the city, you arrive in the airport, and you have one normal map with the addresses and the other one with the artists. So you want to go to Gerhard Richter neighborhood, you want to go to the, I don't know, whomever else to mention a road, or to Olafur Eliasson Park. But it needed a very serious quantity of paint, and we didn't find it. So, but the company would have made a fantastic publicity, because once you have it, you make a catalog and you say, "Look how we change your life," and everyone would buy that paint after. But didn't find yet this visionary company of paint. This is an unrealized project.
There could not be a more wonderful conclusion. Edi, thank you so much. Thank you all very much. Thank you.